Good morning, Mosaic. My name is Logan. I'm an intern here, and I have a really exciting message that I want to give to you. This is something that's really been weighing on my heart a lot recently as I've been going through school. Over the last year specifically, this one question has been weighing a lot on me, just in everything that I do, in every place that I go, and everywhere that I go to. This question has stuck out to me the most. This question has stuck with me, and that question is, what does it mean to be great? I know it's a strange question, but I'm in college right now. I am currently in my sophomore year of biblical studies, and I've been thinking a lot about the future. I've been thinking a lot about what I'm going to do when I get bigger, what kind of things I'm going to pursue, what kind of pastor I'm going to be, what kind of man I'm going to become, what impact I'm going to have eventually later on down the road. And more than anything, I want my life to be important. I want it to matter and be meaningful and impactful. So how do I do that? It's been a really big focus of mine. And before we get too far into it, I know preaching about greatness is a little weird, okay? Preaching about being the greatest, doing the greatest thing, it can be a little strange, okay? Because I feel like we've had this idea of what greatness is ingrained in us, but I want to change that a little bit. I want to fight back against that idea that we've built about greatness. But we'll get to that in due time. But the reason why I think greatness is so important is because think about every day that you wake up. None of us wake up hoping to live an average life with average things and average expectations, right? Think about graduation. When we graduate, we don't see the person walk across the stage and go, wow, that person did a great job at being average. He was the perfect average person, because we all want to make a difference. Our lives, we want to make count. We want them to be important and impactful. And maybe for you, you're not hoping to be a great student because you've passed that chapter of your life. Maybe for you, it's more the question of, how do I be a great parent? How do I be a great spouse? How do I be a great teacher or employee or friend? Maybe even, how do I impact people with my free time? We want to be great. Greatness is kind of ingrained in us from childhood, and every stage and every age. We want to be great. We want to do something great and meaningful with our lives. But the problem is, the definition that we have for greatness is skewed. The definition that we have is from this world, and it teaches us the same thing that has taught us for a very long time: to be at the top, to climb to the top, to achieve more, to be the best, to need less help, and to stand up above the crowd, to be the one at the top, the pinnacle, the peak. And if we're not careful, we can spend our entire lives chasing that kind of greatness instead of the real greatness that's offered to us by Jesus. So what does Jesus say about greatness? Again, we'll get into that. But the good news is that he does talk about it, and he doesn't say that we should avoid it. What's interesting is that his answer is given to us actually through the disciples, through how the disciples were interacting with each other and the ways that Jesus saw it, and how he countered the ideas that they had, the ideas that are very similar to what we think of greatness. In Mark chapter 9, the disciples were all walking down the road together, and they were debating. We'll get into that in a second, but they weren't talking about like theology. They weren't talking about the miracles that they had just performed. They weren't talking about something else that's silly in their lives. They were arguing about greatness. They were arguing about who would be the greatest. In Mark 9, verse 33, we see this opening. They came to Capernaum. When he was at the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? He being Jesus. But the disciples kept quiet, because on the way they had been arguing about that very thing. Who would be the greatest? Who would be the greatest among them? Now, a little context. We'll step back for a second, because that question is a little strange for them to just be arguing about. But it's because of what happened moments before this, longer maybe. But Jesus had come to his disciples before this interaction, and he had told them that he was going to suffer and die. Jesus came to his disciples, the 12 closest people to him, and he let them know that his death was imminent, that it was coming, that it was on its way. But he also told them that he would rise again. He told them the story of what would happen. And for the disciples, that last part, the rising again part, didn't make a lot of sense for them. So instead, they decided that they were going to have to find a replacement for their teacher. as they walked down the road together, their conversation shifted a little bit. I like to imagine their conversation being something about probably the miracles that they had performed right away. And they were like, oh, yeah, Jesus did that thing. It was so awesome. And then they're talking about each other. And, oh, yeah, you did a really great job with this and that. And then their conversation shifted a little bit. And they were like, yeah, but what Jesus said, what do we do about that? And their conversation probably looked a lot like, okay, well, with Jesus going away, who's going to be the next in charge? Who's going to be the leader? Who's going to be the most important? And that conversation quickly changed from just a conversation to an argument about who was the greatest. Who was the greatest among the 12 disciples, which I would say that's a pretty human response, right? I think a lot of us in that same situation probably would have done the same thing. Argued about who was next, who was upcoming, because their teacher was leaving. So they needed somebody to take his place. When uncertainty comes like this, I think, at least in my life, I kind of start thinking about this sometimes too. Start wondering, where do I fit in? Where do I go? I start comparing myself to other people. And I think, how important am I to this? If my teacher was to leave right now, how would I fare? Would I be able to take their place? But the problem in the disciples' discussion was that they weren't just talking about who would be the greatest so that they could serve like Jesus, or so that they could talk to other people like Jesus, or teach like him, or heal like him. They wanted to be like Jesus so that they could have his position. They wanted to be known for being the top dog, the one that was at the highest peak of what they were doing, their teacher, the one that was in charge of them. What's even more telling is what happens when Jesus asks about it, right? Because they didn't answer. The disciples didn't give Jesus a straight answer. The men, they were bold enough to argue about this, feet behind Jesus while they were walking, but they weren't bold enough to talk to Jesus about it when they were in the house. I think the reason why is because deep down, they knew that they weren't fighting for the right reason. They knew that they were arguing over something that was selfish, right? It was self-centered. They thought that Jesus hadn't heard them, but he heard every word and he confronted them about it. But what we see next is Jesus' teaching through that confrontation. Jesus doesn't just get mad at them or get upset or throw things at them. In verse 35, we see the way that Jesus addresses this. Mark 9:35, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and he said, anyone who wants to be the first must be the very last and the servant of all. Jesus' response is kind of surprising, right? Because he doesn't scold them. He doesn't yell at them. He doesn't tell them that their pursuit of greatness is awful. What he says is, to be great, you must be the last. It's not what our society teaches us. It's not what we learn in schools. We don't learn that greatness comes from being last. We learn that it comes from being first. The disciples saw greatness as standing above the crowd at the top. But Jesus taught that it was by lowering yourself for the sake of others, for those people around you that aren't doing as well. Greatness isn't measured by how many people serve under you, but by how willing you are to serve under others. The path to being first is not by climbing over people. It's not by clawing and scratching and snarling. It's by humbly placing yourself below people, below those around you that aren't as fortunate. The path up begins by going down, which seems really strange, right? It's backwards. It seems opposite, contrary to what we're taught, right? The world teaches us to seek the status, the recognition, the influence, to be more known. But Jesus teaches us that true greatness comes from humility and from our dependence on God, from being solely dependent on God himself. The disciples wanted to know who mattered the most among them, but Jesus showed them that the truly greatest person was the one who let himself be at the bottom, the one who was willing to serve, the one who was willing to be the lowest, not the one who wanted to stand above them all. Continuing forward, Jesus' teaching isn't done here. Verse 36, Jesus took a little child and he placed them among the group. Taking the child in his arms, Jesus said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Jesus here is redefining what greatness looks like Totally. He's completely tearing it down and rebuilding what it means to be great. The disciples imagined it as being first, but Jesus shows them that it's actually by being lowly, like a child. Now, in our society, children are looked at with a lot of potential. They have a lot of energy. They could do a lot of things, right? They could be astronauts or scientists or doctors or a million other things. But in their society, children were looked at very lowly. They were looked at as the lowest class of people in their society. They were looked very down upon. And the only person that really had any value as a child was the firstborn, because that was who got the inheritance whenever the dad died. Now, I think when we look at this, when we look at what Jesus is doing here, it raises a lot more questions than it actually answers, because what is it about children that Jesus wants us to imitate? What is it that Jesus is calling us to be like, that he sees in a child, that he wants us to imitate? For me personally, when I think of this verse, it takes me straight to the 3-year-old that my family is fostering right now. Her name's Abby. She's the sweetest, most loving little girl in the world. But if you have a toddler, you know that they can be a little question forward. Lots of whys all the time. If you have a toddler at home, you're probably hearing them ask why right now, because that's what they do. That's what they do best. That's like their full-time job, basically, is just to ask why over and over and over again, constantly, because they want to know about the world. They want to know more. They want to get their questions answered from the people that, to them, know everything, right? We're the people that give them all the answers. And the other thing about that actually is that she also loves to be around people. She loves to be around us. She loves to be around other people in her life, people that mean a lot to her, so much so that sometimes we kind of have to like pull her back away from some doors because she loves knocking. She loves knocking and asking if she can come in. She's learned how to say, Abby, come in. She doesn't know grammar yet, but she's getting there. We're working on it. She wants to be included. She wants to be part of the family because she loves us and cares about us. The most interesting part about that to me is when I look at the 5th and 6th graders that I work with on Sunday mornings, because they're kind of the opposite, right? They have a lot of questions still, yes, but their questions are a lot fewer and farther between, and their questions are so much deeper. They're thought out. They've already looked for answers, and you're kind of the next option, right? They've already looked at Google. They've already looked at ChatGPT probably a couple times, but they're coming to you now because they know that you'll have a real answer, one that'll actually solve their problem, one that'll solve it in a way that they've been seeking, but they haven't been able to find. The other thing about middle schoolers and high schoolers is that they don't hang around the family as much, right? They've kind of learned from the world that we're supposed to be independent. They've learned that being independent is better than being dependent around people. And I think that's such an interesting thought, because as we get older, there are shifts. There are lots of shifts that happen between Abby and between some middle schoolers and some high schoolers and between me as a 21-year-old and even up into middle age. There's so many shifts that happen, especially in our dependence. And I think the reason why those shifts happen is because as we get older, we forget an essential truth in our life, that we need help, that you need help, that I need help. That we're taught that growing up means being more independent, needing help less, needing less people around you, needing less of God. We learn new skills and we have more responsibilities, and that's a great thing. But once the dependence starts shifting from being more responsible to avoiding God, that's where the shift really gets detrimental. And a lot of times we don't even realize that it's happening, right? The shift just changes, and then all of a sudden, we're far away. Right? We want to be great parents and teachers and spouses, but sometimes that shift happens and we don't even realize it. For me, I did notice this shift. I noticed this shift from my greatness being in relying on God to my greatness being in relying on myself. About a year ago, in school, I have decent grades. I'm doing a good job. But about a year ago, I kind of shifted from I'm doing a good job to I want to do a great job by myself. And I just started going all after it out of pride rather than trying to get stuff done, right? I was working for the kingdom of God. I was doing things for Jesus. I was working in church and I was working at school and I was doing all the things to learn more. But I wasn't depending on God. I wasn't actually coming to him first with my questions. I wasn't coming to him straight away when I had something come up in my life that I didn't understand. I was depending on my own strength and not on his. He was giving me answers to problems that I wasn't ready to ask. And because of that, I got really lost. I got really frustrated and I got really angry and I got really dependent on myself through that. I got really laser focused on what I could do to be better, what I could do to be more effective and more efficient. But I didn't go to the one who had the answers. I didn't go to God with those things. It wasn't until I took a class last semester, it was called Spiritual Formations, and it was a class all about how God affects and changes our lives, how God takes the things that are in our lives and transforms them to be great, to be actually great, to be great the way that God intended, not great the way that the world sees. Through that class, I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time deep in my word, deep in the scriptures and in the word, and focused on God and the true transformation that he has in our lives, that he wants for my life. And through that, I realized the dependency that I had on my own answers and my own thoughts, what I thought that I could do well. And when I stepped into Christ, when I centered my life on him, rather than being centered on my schoolwork or on my grades or how effective I was at doing them, when I really centered my life on Christ, I started realizing that dependence is where we find actual answer and actual greatness. Greatness doesn't come from our own effectiveness, our own efficiency, but it comes from relying on God and his transformation in our lives. Greatness comes from when we come to the Father and honestly ask, what do I do now? What's next, God? How do I be great? That's how we learn greatness, true greatness. And I think that's why this passage hit me so hard, was because somewhere along the way, as I was traversing school, I lost why. I lost the reason that I was pursuing greatness. And I found it in this verse, Jesus telling his disciples to stop pursuing greatness on their own strength, to be like a child, to lower yourself. This simple teaching really focuses on Jesus. It focuses on how we can be great through him and focus on him. That's why he brought the child forward. That's why he placed the child in the midst of these disciples, because Jesus wanted to show them that the way that this child relies on his parents, the way that this child relies on its family to give it answers, is the way that we should rely on our family, our church family, and the way that we should rely on God for our answers. We should come to him first, like Abby, like the 3-year-old Abby, that comes straight to us for answers, that comes straight to our family, that comes straight to my parents for answers, because that's where she finds real comfort and real answers. That's where her questions actually come to fruition. Like that, we should be going to the Father right away for our answers. Not to the world, not to what else is out there for us, but we should be going straight to God, because he will bring true greatness in our lives. Please join me in prayer as we wrap up this message. Dear Lord, thank you for this time that we get to spend focused on your goodness, God, the greatness that you have for our lives, the greatness that you've designed us for. God, thank you for this passage, Lord, that's so filled with answers to our lives, Lord. I pray that as we go about our week, as we go about our month, Lord, that we can try to be more like children in our lives, Lord, coming to you for answers rather than the things of this world. God, I pray that we can rely on you more and that we can focus on you more through our lives and through our days, and that we can focus on you when we have any questions, anything that comes up, any inquiries, Lord. I pray that we come straight to you, Lord. Center our hearts on Jesus. Thank you for this passage. In your holy name, amen.